Hello, Duncan here. Just a quick reminder that myself and Rob are going to be doing this podcast live at the Imperial War Museum on the 1st of November. We'll be watching 1917, we'll have a guest, we will definitely sign any of our books for you. You should definitely come along. You can get tickets from the Imperial War Museum website. That's on the 1st of November.
And Rob here, just to say boringly that if you would like to fill in our audience survey, that might help us to get a bit of advertising money, which would help to keep us in pizzas and war books and war movies. And the links for both of these things are on everywhere we can put them, but the link for the survey is bit.ly/warmovietheatre-survey. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to War Movie Theatre, where we're going to take off and nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. This week, we're setting off across the galaxy to find out what's happened to a bunch of colonists on a distant planet. But is it going to be a bug hunt or a stand-up fight? That's right, we're watching Aliens. I'm Rob Hutton, and I've reluctantly agreed to do this podcast in the hope it might end my nightmares. I was going to be joined by Duncan Weldon to hunt down the beast that killed my crew, but at the last minute, he's decided to send me in alone. Does he have a plan to profit from my death? And locking and loading is a man who just needs to know one thing: where they are. Author, journalist, podcaster, and teller of cultural histories through film, it's Brian Raftery. Hello, Brian.
Hey, how you doing?
Very well. Very excited to have you on. I should introduce you to our listeners. One of the things that people keep writing into us to say is, when are you going to do Vietnam? Because we haven't done a Vietnam film, although I think by the time people have heard this, they will have heard our episode on Platoon. But while I was doing Vietnam research, I came across your amazing podcast series, limited series, Do We Get to Win This Time? Which, if you like War Movie Theatre and you're at all interested in the cinema in Vietnam, you should hunt that down. It's from the Ringer podcast people, and it's just a terrific. It's one of the things that this podcast tries to be, which is sort of a cultural history. Is that fair? I mean,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the show is kind of looking at, it's slightly personal in that, at least for me, as a kind of young Gen Xer in America in the 80s. The Vietnam War was more of a popular culture sort of entity than an actual historical event in a strange way. Like, I was watching all of these Vietnam movies when I was 11 or 12, and I didn't know much about the war itself. And it was really good in that it kind of, those kind of movies and a lot of war films make me interested in history. The not so great part is that not all these movies are super accurate or telling the entire story of these wars. So the point of Do We Get to Win This Time was sort of, talking to Oliver Stone about Platoon, or talking about how these movies were made, but also how they kind of shaped Gen X's perception of Vietnam, which again, the war was 15 years over by the time I was kind of getting interested in it. And yet that was the dominant war of my childhood in a way, mostly through 60s culture and again, movies like Platoon and Born on the 4th of July and Full Metal Jacket. So yeah, and it was fun to go into that show and learn about these movies, realize what impact they had on young people in America, but also realize they were only telling the American story in those films. A lot of history was left out of these movies. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think one of the things that we were thinking when we started doing this was, and when we started doing this podcast, we were mainly sort of looking at, I think, British films even from during the war, but then the 50s and 60s is sort of this is how Britain is telling itself a story about the things it's been through.
Right.
And what I think your series captured very well is America telling itself a story about the thing that it's been through, and the way that the sort of the perception changes, both the films that are made in the 70s that are pretending not to be about Vietnam but are pretty obviously about it, and then through to things like Platoon, and we'll talk about another one that might really secretly be about Vietnam in just a moment.
Yeah.
But tell us slightly about your new series, Mission Accomplished. What's that about?
That Mission Accomplished is looking at this very strange time, and it's very it's very American centric, but it's basically looking at the George W. Bush years, starting in 2000, and then maybe going to a little bit in 2009, right as after he left office. But looking at the historical events of that time, which are pretty obvious. I mean, it's 9/11 and the Iraq War. We had Hurricane Katrina in America. We had this terrible recession, which we might be about to repeat. I'm not sure how things will be this couple months, but it's looking at some of the big films and the important films of that era. Movies like Michael Clayton or Zodiac or Anchorman or Donnie Darko, and looking at talking about how they were made, because these movies all have really fascinating behind the scenes stories, right? But also looking at what were these movies reflecting about that period, and kind of whether intentionally or not, which I think is a really fun way to look at movies. I think to look at movies and say, well, if you watch Zodiac, you'll know exactly what it was like when the Zodiac killer was alive, and or possibly still alive. Actually, I should say we don't actually have that resolved yet. When he was most active, but movies can only take you so far, and I think it's more fun sometimes to look at like what are the movies trying to tell you about that time that they don't even realize. When I told people that the movie's about the Bush years, and I mentioned Anchorman, people are like, "What does Anchorman have to do with the Bush years?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a time when America was looking at the past and people were being very nostalgic for the 70s and 80s, and Anchorman is kind of like, hey, the 70s weren't that great, actually. And also, the people that are in charge of telling you the news, telling you what's going on in the world, a lot of times there's a lot of Ron Burgundys who are doing that. So it's talking to Adam McKay about that, talking to Tony Gilroy about Michael Clayton, about what that movie sort of meant for the time, and his own frustrations about the Iraq War and media at that point. So hopefully it's really fun. We try to pick movies that people really do love and can't get enough of, but also movies that hopefully resonate with what was going on in America at that time. I mean, the fact that we went from, the shorthand for the show is, how do we go from Aaron Brockovich to Michael Clayton in like 7 or 8 years? Like optimistic American can-do to George Clooney, out of money, like basically realizing he's been part of this terrible corporation for all these years that's literally helping kill people. So it's kind of looking at that very interesting stretch of American history that at the time felt like the most tumultuous era I'd ever lived through, but little did I know,
Yeah, no. What will the movies be like for this decade?
That's one of the questions, and that's one thing I'm excited for. Like, we all talk about what Sinners represents in 2025. What will Sinners mean to us in 2045? I mean, what will it be telling us about this time that we don't even realize now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the films that you've done in the episodes I listened to so far, is actually one that's on our list, which is The Manchurian Candidate.
Oh yeah,
which is interesting. There's sort of partly because there's 2 Manchurian Candidates, and they're different films about different things, if that makes sense. The sort of the 50s 60s one is Cold War paranoia, and and you explain how the 2003 one is much more kind of sort of post 9/11 paranoia.
I mean, I think if there was someone who was really young who wanted to know what life was like in America in those couple of years after 9/11, I think like emotionally it would be 25th Hour, the Spike Lee movie. But I think politically and just kind of culturally, I think Manchurian Candidate does the best job. I mean, it came out in the early 2000s, but it really plugs you into that time of like rah-rah jingoism versus a real kind of uneasy feeling of like, are we actually going the right way? And I think it's also a really underrated movie. I do love how it was updated. I love Jonathan Demme and his movie. His career is so fascinating. But I think that's a very I've heard from a lot of people who were like, oh, I love Manchurian Candidate, and I'm like, oh, great, because I thought this was kind of like a kind of overlooked movie, but I'm glad people are either discovering it or affirming their love of it.
So, going to war movies, when I contacted you, I said, we're trying to tilt towards Vietnam. You seem to know a lot about Vietnam films. Would you like to pick one? And your response was, let's do Aliens. Why?
Well, partly I absolutely love this movie, and it's a lot of people's all-time favorite. It's definitely on my top 50 list. I finally, it's a long story, but I finally only got to see it in the theater a year and a half ago at the New Beverly here in Los Angeles, seeing it on film, sitting in the front row with my then 12-year-old daughter. Both of us, I mean, gripping. I've seen this movie a million times. I know who lives, who dies, but it's one of those rare movies where I'm watching and I'm like, oh, I hope you make it this. They're like, oh, I forget this, and I'm always like, are they going to get out of this thing in time? Are they going to get off the planet before it blows? But I also think, you could look at Aliens as an allegory for Vietnam. And obviously there's a lot of 80s sci-fi movies that people look, there's some people think Return of the Jedi in some ways is an allegory for Vietnam. And the idea with aliens is kind of the same, what happens when a highly militarized, highly confident kind of outside force comes in very gung ho and is kind of undermined by the actual residents of this place they're trying. I'm trying not to give away too much, or but the the Ewoks and the aliens are very different. I don't want to put them together the same. But the idea of like going to a habitat, assuming you're going to control it, and then being completely devastated by the people who live in this area know they are warriors too, and they can push back. And for some people, I how much Cameron was really thinking about Vietnam while putting this together. Maybe he's talked about that later years, but it definitely, I could see someone sitting there in 1986 and being like, this story, the beats of this story feel fairly recent.
Well, it comes out the same year as Platoon. So
which is wild.
It's at that moment where sort of this goes from being something that nobody wants to talk about, something that everybody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, the dropship. One of the things if anybody wants to do a deep dive on the making of Aliens, the good news is there's a lot of material out there. I've just been watching a 3-hour making of documentary, which is on YouTube. And one of the things I learned from that is the dropship is deliberately made to look like a sort of a combination of Vietnam era American aircraft. So it's got the Bell helicopter sort of front. And I think it was the Phantoms they were flying. It's certainly the set designers are thinking Vietnam.
And
and I think one of the things that becomes clear about James Cameron is that most of what he does is intentional. So it probably is deliberate. It's probably not him just kind of sometimes we back rationalize from what
absolutely
we got but I think that's probably not him. How did you slightly odd question, how did you first encounter this? Did you first encounter this as a film, or because I first encountered this as a board game, weirdly.
Oh wow.
At my school, and people were playing the Aliens board game, and all of these other kids at school could quote this film verbatim, the whole thing.
It's funny. I was very aware of. I had a kind of a strange relationship to these movies, Alien and Aliens, and sort of horror and sci-fi in general. In that I was 10 when Aliens came out, and at that point in my life, I was fascinated by horror movies and sci-fi movies. Yet I refused to watch any of them because I was terrified. So my sources of information came from Mad Magazine parodies, older camp counselors or older cousins explaining the plots of these movies to me, or reading the reviews. I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I read the Philadelphia Inquirer's reviews of all these movies. So when I was 10 and this movie was out, I'd heard so much about it. I was so scared to see it. I was not allowed to see R-rated movies. I convinced my mom to let me go to the Gateway Theater in Pennsylvania to go see it. And I got so scared during the opening credits that I left. And I told the kids I went through the next day. I remember calling the kid who I'd abandoned there. I called my mom from the lobby, asked her to pick me up, and then I told these kids the next day. I was like, "Yeah, I got sick from like a Reese's Pieces," like trying to cover up how scared I was. I couldn't even make it the opening credits. It was built up so much in my head. I'd been told that this was the scariest movie ever made, and that you're just going to be like living in fear. So my relationship with this movie was very much like arm's length for a year or two, but then I wound up finally seeing it, and then at a certain point, I had an Apple IIc Aliens game, which I played all the time, which follows a lot of the story beats of the movie. It's actually like a pretty fun game. I wish I could kind of find a mod for it to kind of play it now. But no, I mean, when this came out in 1986, it was truly culturally inescapable, even if you were 10 years old. I mean, you knew that someone says like "kill me" and then an alien pops out of their chest. You knew about the cool ass flamethrower gun combo. Those things I knew about. When I saw it repeatedly in the late 80s and through the 90s when I was a teenager, I was not looking at it like this is an interesting allegory for Vietnam. I was like, holy shit, it's so scary when they come out of the seal. You know what I mean? It was the more visceral pleasures of this movie. But yeah, and I absolutely, I've seen it a gazillion times. And the same with Alien 2, which is the first Alien, which is a movie I didn't see, I was terrified of, but knew all about. I had a kind of arm's length strange relationship with a lot of horror movies and sci-fi movies that wound up becoming my favorite films. And I recognize it now. One of my younger daughter is very interested in hearing about what the latest horror movie is about, but does not even want to see the commercial. So it's that step of movies where you're a little bit of a fraidy cat for good reason, but
Yeah.
you're just wondering what's the movie that's going to be that big leap forward for you, where you're not totally terrified of these things anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw Aliens before I saw Alien,
Okay.
because this was at a point where you could only see these things if they were in the video rental shop in
Right.
the UK, effectively, and they must have had Alien. They must have had Alien, and I know I rented Aliens from them, but I know that I watched Alien when the BBC showed it late on a Friday night, and I went round to my friend James's house, and I think I was that was early 90s by that point. So weirdly, we went into it backwards, which is but I think a lot of people of our generation probably did, and it sort of works. It works as its own film. This sort of,
Absolutely,
you know. It slightly changes Alien because you know who's going to be going at the end of that. But I don't. Yes, and I know I saw the special edition when they released it. I was very excited to be able to rent that from the video shop in about 1992 or 3, with 4 extra minutes or something. And then I think I saw it on the big screen. I think I saw it at the big screen at university because I think the Film Society showed it, or maybe one of the local cinemas in Edinburgh sort of showed it. There was an obvious double bill to do that you could do in a university town, and tack out a theatre from midnight. But yeah, I mean, you're right that it was kind of omnipresent, and there's jokes about it in Terry Pratchett books. There are jokes about it. It completely takes over the culture. The strange thing is how much Fox don't want to make this film before it's made.
Yeah. I mean, it's very strange to me. I mean, I don't understand the resistance, but I do. It's weird now when you think about the difference between Alien and Aliens. It's what, 79 to 86, and nowadays that kind of lag, it's annoying, but it does happen. But I do wonder if back then they were like, wait a minute, Star Wars was 3 years apart, and that was like almost, that was an insanely long way to wait. And I'm not sure whether they were just sort of like, look, maybe the audience of this has fizzled out, or maybe it's just too long in people's memories. It seems like a no-brainer, but then again, I wasn't running a movie studio in 1985 and greenlighting stuff, so I'm not sure why they wouldn't see this as a kind of a sure thing. But I also wonder if Cameron was coming off the Terminator, but that's not necessarily a movie you look at and go, okay, this guy can now do a full-on overseas combat movie with a huge star at the center of it, that has to balance effects and practical effects, and we're basically handing over this potentially lucrative franchise to this guy also James Cameron probably really annoyed a lot of the people at Fox. It's kind of like every story he tells about resistance to his movies getting made. I'm like, is it because you were just in the room being James Cameron? Respectfully, he's incredibly talented, but he's not someone whose ego is ever in check. Or I mean, you're just basically, it's right there, right in front of you at all times.
So there are partly it's that there's a change of Fox executives, and the new Fox executives, in this way that sort of Bill Goldman always describes. The new Fox executives just hate everything that the old Fox executives did.
Right.
So if we're not doing anything with the Alien thing, they also, in a way that is completely impossible to explain in 2025, don't like sequels. It's Hollywood at this point, doesn't think sequels really work. They cost more and they make less, is the rule. And they don't want to make horror films. It's like, I mean, there's a line in your latest podcast where somebody says, "Oh no, young women don't go to the movies," and you think, right, okay,
yeah,
that's a point of view,
right? Yeah,
and in the same way, telling someone in 2025, oh no, nobody wants to make horror movies. It's like the only things that can get made at the moment are horror films and sequels. But in the early 80s, that is apparently not the case. At some point, somebody sort of sees the screenplay of Terminator, I think before it's been made, and says, "Get this guy to have a crack at an Alien sequel." I mean, which is then called Alien 2.
Right.
And actually, it's a real. I mean, everybody who then sees the Alien. James Cameron is working on writing this screenplay while he is editing Terminator, because he is also a machine. And when Terminator comes out and does very well, he's been arguing that he ought to be allowed to direct this film. They like it. We don't really want you to. I don't think we want to give you all this money, James. And Terminator comes out and does very well, and they go, okay, well, maybe he could, but there's an issue also because he wants his wife Gail Ann Hurd to be the producer, and that's kind of, well, that's not. I mean, that's not best practice.
Sure. Yeah.
but somehow he does manage to turn them around. And then they have this row about whether they can get Sigourney Weaver or not. Do you know what she was paid for Alien, the first one?
I don't know. I'm sure it was an incredibly embarrassing amount.
$35,000. I mean, that's it's probably more in '79.
That's pretty paltry, yeah.
And she's done Ghostbusters, and she wants the enormous sum of $1 million,
right?
Which doesn't also. It's like, I mean, that's like $3 million now, which is nothing, really. for a 2.5-hour film where she's going to be on screen the whole time,
she is the movie. You can't make it without her. I mean, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure Cameron. I mean, and I'm sure whatever leverage she had, aside from being like, she would have been great in the role, but it's like you'd have to rewrite the entire first third of the movie to even have it make sense, and it would have no resonance without the first one, I don't think.
I mean, well, there is a story. There are lots of stories about it. There is a story that they in the course of the negotiations, at some point, either Cameron or Hurd tells Schwarzenegger's agent that they are now working on a version of Aliens that doesn't have Ripley in it, because they know that Schwarzenegger's agent will tell Sigourney Weaver's agent. And according to this version of the story, 2 weeks later they sign the deal. I mean, she gets her $1 million, which so I just think is cheap. And they decide they're going to film in Pinewood, in London, which will create a series of problems. One of which is that trade unions are still incredibly strong in Britain at that point, and so the Actors Union basically says, before you can even consider bringing someone over from America for this film, you have to have ruled out all of the actors who are in Britain. So the casting director has to sort of see everyone in Britain who is American and has an equity card, the Actors Union card, and everyone in Britain who has an equity card who thinks they can do an American accent. And the casting director claims to have auditioned 3,000 people to get her group of Marines, and some of them are sort of actors who, if you look to who were living in Britain at the time, and were, well, I think we'll probably come to one of them.
Does that mean, could we have gotten like Michael Gambon as Hicks or something like, or as Hicks or something like that? Like, I actually would have loved to see like Bob Hoskins as Hudson or something like that. Would be fantastic. I actually would have been very much on board for that.
I mean, in the first one, Ian Holm is the android in the first one, and he's terrific in that. And
he's great in that. Yeah.
Great example of we will get a classically trained British actor to come and be our villain.
Yes.
And the sort of the Alan Rickman route. Cameron makes the cast read Starship Troopers, the book. He sends them to train with SAS people, which they all talk about as being very tough. But because I've just done the research on the making of Platoon, which actually is also something you talk about.
In
your podcast, is not very tough compared to what the cast of Platoon had to do. And then, so what do you know about the filming of this?
I know that he clashed a lot with the British crew. I mean, I know that was he did not. The weird thing is, like, there's all these reports of like him being so irritated when they would do the daily tea time, but like he must have gotten a heads up about it. I mean, that's the thing. It's always so fascinating about these stories about American filmmakers clashing with local crews. Like, didn't anyone prepare them or tell them about this at all? It's like, because Ridley Scott also had issues on Blade Runner, I think, right? Wasn't he sort of fighting with the crew about? And it's just
Yes.
like, don't they tell you when you land at Heathrow, like, hey, by the way, like there's tea time at 10 a.m. and all this stuff. I mean, it is kind of wild to me that these clashes were going on for like a good 20 years until someone finally stepped up and they just
Well,
told directors what they were doing.
I mean, it's sort of. I mean, Scott is British, so he would probably not. There would be a level of this that he just accepted
Yeah.
and thought was
Yeah,
normal.
yeah.
It's it may just. I mean, yes, there is an element of this that is James Cameron works the way that James Cameron works, and as you say, everyone who deals with, and I think he now accepts that he's quite difficult. Apparently, he went to see Ron Howard directing something and couldn't believe how nice Ron Howard was to everyone on the set. I was just like, oh, maybe there's another way. You know, maybe I don't have to be like this. But yeah, and also Britain is incredibly unionized then in a way that America isn't, and I think weirdly now probably the reverse is true in that certainly on the screenwriting side. You know, you can get a British screenwriter to do anything for, you know, a fiver and a packet of crisps, and whereas American screenwriters actually sort of have protections. But
Cameron, you know, and it's important to remember, like, Cameron was coming from this, like, the Roger Corman way. He's coming from a super low budget, like, as long as you show up, you can do whatever you want. You can work 17 hours a day. Like, you can build sets. You can, you know, Cameron was used to being like the guy who walks across the set, picks up a piece of tech and says, I want this painted this. And like, he didn't have to worry about stipulations or regulations. So I think I mean, he's already a tough guy, I'm sure, to work with, but he had been given so much creative latitude in Terminator and working for Corman that I'm sure he was just like completely resentful of anyone even in, you know, slowing down his creative process at all, which makes sense because his creative process had worked so well for the Terminator. It wasn't like he was coming off a bomb where he had overstepped his bounds. I mean, he was a hands-on director who made a huge hit movie.
So, well, this is the thing. So that's how he sees himself. That's not how the British crew see him.
Yes,
and so he keeps. So they, as you said, they have a tea trolley that comes in at 10 a.m. and everyone wants to stop and have a cup of tea at that point, and Cameron just can't understand what is happening.
Yeah,
when this little old lady wheels the tea trolley in, and there are claims that he attacked it, although this may have grown in the telling. They fire the first assistant director, they fire the cinematographer, partly because I'm actually kind of Team Cameron on this, because basically I think its cinematographer said, well, no, I'll light it. We need to have it nice and brightly lit so that people can see what's happening. You know, when they go into the sort of the under the power station, and Cameron's like, no, we need it to all be tiny little, you know, miners lights. It needs to be dark and scary. No, and it's sort of it's you've got you know, I mean, he's right.
Well, also I imagine he'd also wanted to visually separate it from Alien, which is so sterile and bright, you know, in some scenes. But yeah, you couldn't pull off half these sequences with a lot of key lights. I mean, it needs to be dark. It needs to be like lit by these Marines wandering around.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I love about this movie. It's like the set design is beautiful, and you look at even the sort of destroyed facilities they're in have some great streamlining and designs. I mean, it's like it's one of Cameron's best looking movies, and yet you can't see what's going on half the time, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much.
And I think partly you can't, because, I mean, for instance, they get away with a sort of, one of the ways they make the aliens mobile is they make quite basic alien suits so that people can really run around in them, but it's fine because it's dark, so you can't really see that. So yeah. You know, so it works. So yes, so he tries to win the crew round by saying, "Come and watch this film, like this great film I've made, Terminator," and the cast will show up, and the crew refuse to turn up. Their basic view is, we've had other Americans through here before, mate, and we'll have more after you.
Sure.
And you know, sort of, they are sort of magnificently unimpressed, and all of the accounts of this are a sort of mix of quite intense Americans saying, "Yeah, well, Jim's got his method and he knows what he wants to do," and then some bloke leaning back going, "Yeah, he's a funny fella, that that Jim Cameron.
Right.
He's got his ideas." It's his final words to them at the end of the shoot, which I think sort of sum up the thing, is, "This has been a long and difficult shoot." I'm not going to attempt to do his accent. "This has been a long and difficult shoot, fraught with many problems. But the one thing that kept me going through it all was the certain knowledge that one day I would drive out the gate of Pinewood and never come back, and that you sorry bastards would all still be here."
That's very different than when like Steven Spielberg flees from Martha's Vineyard in the last day of Jaws, like in the middle of the night, to avoid that kind of conflict.
Yes, I mean he is his own man. So,
yeah.
On which note, let's go to the after action report. And the first part of this is, when I sent you the list, do you understand any of the references that I've
Sure, some of them, yeah,
right.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Quick, Dad, they're on the cable car. It's sort of what's the moment you want to be called. The slight mental image is, if I'm writing in the other room and my kids are watching this film, and they say, "Call me in for the good bits." What are the bits where you want to be called in, and what are the bits where, having been called in, you're going to be unable to leave?
I mean, for me, it's like, and I imagine it's unfortunately kind of an obvious answer, but it's when the Marines finally go into the facility, and you have that 1-2 punch of the woman who is like, "Please kill me," like, which is hard, which is really, really. I mean, that's the thing. Like when I was taking my 12-year-old to see it, she'd seen Alien, which has some jump scares, but I was really worried about that scene because it's not so much scary as it is deeply upsetting. It's a really upsetting scene. And you're kind of like dealing with that, and then just the walls start moving, the ceilings start moving. That is, and everything getting so fucked up beyond repair in just like less than a minute in that scene is phenomenal. It's just the editing is fantastic. Like the Cameron is, for someone who's such a great action director and who moves his camera so much, he's a really patient storyteller. Like you really sort of you barely met these characters, and you know where each one has been plucked away. You know when and how much it hurts, because he just does such a good job with that setup. And within 2 minutes, half the cast is gone, or something like that. Yeah, it's a remarkable scene.
It's really interesting when you look at the various websites where they sort of list all of the deaths, and they're all, and then gives the times of all of them, and it's like, gosh, they're all in the space of 3 minutes. Most and actually, then there's a long period where lots happens, but nobody dies, and then most of the remaining cast is picked off, but actually most of it is sort of at the hour 10 mark, and you get, in a way, it seems to me that your problem writing any sequel is, how are we going to make this the same but different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your problem in the big alien problem in the first one is, we can't kill this thing. We don't know where it is, and we can't kill it. And what's interesting about Aliens is, no, we can kill it. We've got pulse rifles, they fire on pulse. No, we can kill one.
Right.
So, problem is, it turns out there's more than one.
Yeah.
And that's what we can't deal with. And so it makes it's a really sort of this. You can imagine that there will be loads of sort of Alien 2 versions of Alien 2 that are just sort of, what if there were another alien on a different spaceship or something, and they would all just not be as. Whereas this completely sort of reframes the whole thing.
I also think that sequence is so great because you can really tell that Cameron comes from a low budget filmmaking background, because it's a lot of the stuff he's doing in that whole sequence is very easy. I mean, not easy, but it's minimal stuff. It's you're watching the Marines have their cameras on their helmets, so you're watching their footage, which is a really ingenious way of, like, instead of using multiple cameras to cover every single shot, every single moment of combat, you're just seeing people's screens go blank. Which is a really smart, terrifying.
Yeah.
It's a low budget solution, and I also think that I think he's also someone who clearly studied a lot of war movies because again, he only sets most of these characters up. You have that time where they're on the ship together, kind of, bullshitting and kind of razzing one another, but you really kind of know these characters' personalities by that hour 10 mark, which is remarkable. Because I mean, some of them only have like 4 lines. So he's clearly someone who studied the whole like, let's get a band of underdogs kind of together and give them a little bit of personality each one in the first half hour and hope that the audiences are invested. And you're very invested in those characters at that point.
So when they're making one of the genius things about the first film, Alien, is writing them. The writers realized they don't. All science fiction, so sort of spacemen talk like people in Star Trek or something. No, these guys are truckers. And they should talk like truckers. And the writer goes and sits in trucking cafes and listens to truckers, and it's like all they talk about, all they care about. Sorry to truckers listening to this, is money. Are we going to get paid? Are we going to get screwed on our bonuses this time?
Yeah.
Are we going to get in fast enough that we can get out for another job? They're not interested in exploring the universe and discovering strange new worlds. It's just a job. And what struck me with this, when the sort of the bit where they're getting out of hypersleep, is they're Marines. They just talk like Marines, and as you say, you recognize them from all sorts of films, from Vietnam films, from World War II films. You recognize them as they're guys who talk about Marines. They talk like Marines, and they that all of that sequence. You get the dynamics. You get the fact that none of them like the lieutenant. You get the fact that Apone's really running the unit, and you get Hicks is all right. Hudson's a bit of a dick, and Vasquez is. I think Vasquez was probably the most surprising character in a weird way in 1986. This sort of small woman who's also the toughest soldier in the unit.
I think so. I mean, it's also like, I mean, considering it's her and Ripley, I mean, it's like, it's hard to think of that many action movies that have at least one really strong, great female protagonist from this time, much less two. And it's funny because the Vasquez is, I'm assuming anyone listening to this has seen the movie, but
they're men like us.
Yeah, I mean, but I also think that Vasquez's death scene is also one of my favorite. I mean, I think it's, first of all, one thing that the movie does well, again, it's kind of that low budget thing where it's like a lot of the scenes that are the scariest are not big elaborate monster movie moves. They're the claustrophobia, like it's them going through those air ducts or whatever they are, and those things are scurrying around the corner. You're barely even seeing the aliens. But she's so great, and that is a great earned death. That's one of the best death scenes, I think. It's maybe if it weren't for
we've got a whole category for that.
yeah, but if it weren't for Burke, which I think Burke is my favorite death scene in this movie, Vasquez is it's very noble, it's very honest, and it's just again, you're pointing about the truckers and Alien, these are people who are doing a job, and at the end of the day, they know they're gonna get screwed over, and Vasquez's whole thing is of course I got screwed over in the end. Of course, the military, he's of course this was a dumb mission. This leader is an idiot, and of course I'm the one who's going to pay for it, and then boom, blows up. It's a fantastic finale for a character who, again, 12 minutes of screen time, maybe 15, total. You really feel the impact of that.
Yeah, there are so many lovely details. I mean, going back earlier, there's sort of other people who talk not like spacemen. Pretty much the first line of dialogue when they get onto the Ripley's shuttle and they discover that she's alive is, "There goes our salvage," and it's not
right.
It's not quick. There's someone alive. Call the doctor.
Yep.
All of the stuff that that sort of James Kirk would say. It's I thought we'd found some money here. Now we've got someone we've got to rescue. Oh, what a pain. It's that post Star Wars thing of space is a pain in the ass because no matter what, someone's got to fly the Millennium Falcon, someone's got to haul whatever, someone's got to respond to whatever dumb distress signal from some terraformers they don't want to deal with, and everyone's not getting paid for overtime. So it's it is a smart way of starting a blockbuster. Also, one of the quietest, most patient openings to a blockbuster science fiction movie is just
that little ship and what's going on is a laser, and it's a great kind of misdirect for the first 30 seconds of the movie, first minute or so.
And then when Ripley's sort of briefing the corporate meeting, I noticed this time for the first time, you look at what they're doing. There's a guy doing a crossword while she is talking about this alien. It's just that's a real blink and you'll miss it moment.
I mean, Cameron is really interested in class. That's what Titanic is. I mean, he is interested in class issues, class divisions, and how that affects who lives and who dies, frankly. I mean, those are really interesting parts of some of his movies.
15-year-old who watched this with me had been saying throughout sort of the run up to this, why are you doing Aliens? Aliens is not a war film. Why are you doing Aliens? It's not a war film. And he'd never seen it before. And we get to the Marines getting ready. And he said, oh, it's snare drums. It's a war movie. And he's right. I'm purists will say this is not a war movie. This is absolutely a war movie, and it's a film about men in combat, and it even more so, I think, maybe than Starship Troopers, which is Starship Troopers is kind of a movie about war movies. It's about how war is communicated, waged, and profited. I mean,
that's one of my. I mean, and that's another one of my favorites. That's actually probably another movie. I know you've already done it. That's my second favorite non-war movie, but actually a war movie of this particular, of the late 20th century. I love those two films.
It was the most popular episode of our last run, I have to say. It's I was very pleased about. And then so we've got this sort of everything goes wrong, and then it just all of that stuff in this sort of the under the power plant, all of that is, as we say, terrific. And then you sort of, I'll turn to Roger Ebert, his review at the time. He said, Aliens is absolutely painfully and unremittingly intense for at least its last hour. Weaver goes into battle to save her colleagues, herself and the little girl, and the aliens drop from the ceiling, pop out from the floor, and crawl out of the ventilation shaft. I have never seen a movie that maintains such a pitch of intensity for so long. It's like being on some kind of hair-raising carnival ride that never stops. And I thought, actually, it's absolutely right. You sort of, I mean, you pretty much from the moment they say you've cut the power, and which would mean there's all of the stuff with the sort of the face huggers, which is just before that, is tremendous, and is all, again, the making of it is really interesting because, as you say, Cameron has come from this low budget background. So when they're trying, there's a few shots where they can't work out how to do them, and he says, "Oh, it's easy. We just run the camera backwards. We do it in reverse.
Yeah.
If we pull the face hugger off her face and then we play that back, it will work." That's not occurred to any of these sort of FX whizzes who are working with them, sort of looking and going, "Wow, can you?" And now in the CGI age, none of this stuff looks so impressive somehow, but that's not right. What am I trying to say? It is still impressive. It's amazing, and I think it looks better than sort of an Avengers film where we can make skyscrapers dissolve or whatever, because somehow this stuff with puppets and so on, it just looks better.
Yeah, and I think also Cameron was smart. I mean, one thing that's really remarkable, I haven't seen Alien in the theater in a long time. Actually, and I still remember this. I saw when they reissued it 20 years ago, and I remember how in the theater how the sound design heightens everything in that movie. And I think in Aliens, that scene where they're, the one has been knocked loose and it's kind of just when I saw it a couple years ago, just the skittering around noises are really terrifying. And again, it's a classic low budget thing where you don't see that little face hugger when it's chasing Newt for that long. And when you do see it, I mean, at one point it's just being thrown against the wall. I mean, it's very, very much here's a finger crawling around. A lot of it is the sound. It's the sound of Newt breathing. It's the sound of it skittering. It's the sound of whatever kind of alarms. And that's really, I don't know, maybe that gets lost a little bit when you're watching at home, but I'll tell you, it is in a theater with a crowd of people who've, again, like me, had seen it dozens of times possibly. There was, when I saw a couple years ago, that last hour is remarkably tense. No one, I imagine it was the best time to go to the bathroom at that theater because no one is there. There's no competition for a stall because no one wants to miss all that.
Yeah.
and it is right. That last half hour, it's like, okay, this was Alien starts as like when it starts, you're like, okay, maybe this is a revenge movie. Like she's going back to right wrongs. Then it becomes a military combat movie. Then it becomes a monster chasing you a little bit movie, and then it becomes a rescue mission movie, which is kind of remarkable. I've watched it a million times, and I don't really notice the seams of those kind of transitions. Like it's very smoothly handled. There's no real clunky left turn in this movie, even though it's always kind of shape shifting in a way.
I mean, and then there is the final battle, which I think did take me by surprise the first time I saw it, and it certainly took my son by surprise because you think that they've taken off.
So great! What a great fake out that ending. Yeah, we were like, we all did it. We did it, guys. High five! And then like Bishop is ripped to half in the most upsetting way possible. Oh my gosh! Yeah.
And Ripley coming in the power loader. I think
amazing.
One of the great movie entrances. That's sort of that you can. It's completely. Has Wallace and Gromit made it to LA because that has been spoofed so many times.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah. Well, I mean, call us in when the Marines go in and see if we can get back to our desks.
It's so well earned too. I mean, just like when I was rewatching it, I was like, oh, they don't make a big fuss out of this power loader. And you see it for 30 seconds in the beginning. It totally makes sense that she would be stuck on this giant archaic lifting thing. And so when there's just something so delightful to it, like 2 hours later when those doors open or whatever, and you make the connection between, oh shit, that thing we saw her in for 30 seconds is now going to be a giant mega suit. I mean, again, I'm saying things that are obvious about Aliens. It is a fantastic like hero's moment. And the fact that it comes that lull after you're lulled for like 2 seconds of like, we did it, guys, we got out of space and we're fine. I mean, that is really James Cameron having the most fun at your expense.
She's not so dumb. There are women in this film. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
And I mean, Cameron spent a lot of time thinking about what sort of a future military might look like.
Yeah.
But you've sort of I mean, it's still a big deal. It's sort of when are women in combat in the U.S. Army, it in some form it's in Gulf War II, isn't it? But not.
That's when it became the most media elevated for me when I became more aware of seeing more female on TV.
Not in combat roles at that point, I think.
I don't believe so. I'm not 100% sure.
One of them is captured, and there was the "I was a soldier too" thing, it's sort of. But he's sort of seen it, and he again, just Vasquez. With the moment that Vasquez starts doing pull-ups, you're like, oh right, okay. So this is sort of.
And the thing about Weaver as Ripley, for people who love this movie, as you mentioned, this is one of the most well documented movies, and also. It's one of the rare movies where the behind the scenes stuff that they cut the deleted scenes are actually really remarkable and really fun to watch. Like it does feel like there's two different versions of the movie. And there's a whole subplot in these deleted scenes about Ripley having had a daughter who has passed on, she's because of her hypersleep. And any other director would have been like, no, we need these emotional beats, the story in it. But Sigourney Weaver is so good. I mean, her desire to write her past to write whatever is going on in her past and get over what happened to her is so well played out in her performance, and her care and nurturing of Newt is so natural that you don't need to know all that. Like you're like, oh, something else is going on here. There's something else, and we don't need to know all that. And I think we've been in this kind of cycle with horror movies the last couple of years, where so many horror movies are like, this is a movie about trauma. This is a movie about dealing with trauma, to the point where it's underlined and emphasized even in scripts, and it's become a little bit of a slightly boring trope. This is a movie about trauma where like she's not traumatized. She's just kind of like she's dealing with all this shit like in the smartest way possible, which is like, all right, I'm gonna go back, and this time we're just gonna. I don't want any more nightmares. Like let's just go kill these things and get rid of them. And it is, I think, in that sense, it is very. It's doing a lot of stuff very well in a very. For a James Cameron movie, to say a James Cameron movie is nuanced in a lot of ways. I do think Aliens is fairly nuanced in a lot of ways.
Well, I think it's part. I think that is Sigourney Weaver. I mean, Sigourney Weaver is terrific. She's terrific in everything. And slightly, she's not an action she's not an action movie star,
Right.
in the sense that she's not somebody that's what she really wants to do.
Yeah.
What she really wants to do, you feel, is sort of terrific character parts and this kind of thing. But because she's got that acting heft, yeah. I mean, I have seen both versions of it. I think it's better without knowing about her daughter. I think it's just it's sort of it's almost too explainy, so yeah, Cameron. There are various bits of it that Cameron is made to cut, and you can see them online, and there is. But I just think I think it's a perfect movie as it is. I wouldn't cut any more.
Oh yeah, the lean version works, but it's one of those rare things where all the ancillary material, again, whether it's the behind the scenes stuff or the deleted scenes, it really does heighten your appreciation for the movie. A lot of those things just, I mean, I've watched so many deleted scenes and listened to so many directors' commentaries, and boy, like some of them just get really, you're like, I know why this scene was cut, and I don't need to see it, or this is just someone who's like kind of mindlessly just on a director's commentary telling the oldest, apocryphal stories. But Aliens, I think one reason why Aliens has endured is like there's a whole academic industry of aliens, and also it was unlike Star Wars, which kind of went away for long periods. After Aliens came out, Dark Horse Comics did this Aliens comic book series, which was really good. Like it was one of those things where I remember buying it the week it came out in like the late '80s, and immediately it was like, this does not have to be this smart. Like you could have just made a dumb monster comic. But they managed to keep the movie kind of in the culture in a way. And when you look at Aliens too, like it came out in '86, it played for months and months and months, still making a lot of money. I mean, at one point that and the Fly remake were like the number 1 and 2 for like a couple of weeks. And it's a movie that hung around for a long, long time. And it never really went away. Like in the '90s, they did the director's version, which bumped up. The Laserdisc was very popular. Now there's all the sequels, but people still, they still do Alien screenings here in LA, and they never not sell out. I mean, there's always an audience for this movie.
Yes, I think so much of that is Sigourney Weaver. The idea that you could have done this without her is, it is ridiculous to me.
No, you needed her for it.
Well, the Cooler King Award for the most gratuitous American character. I mean, it's an American movie. I'm fine with there being Americans in it. I slightly question, especially at the moment, whether America is still top nation in the 23rd century. I mean, maybe you guys are going to get it back together again. But,
yeah, we're trying.
And introducing, I mean, there is somebody whose career is made by this, which is Bill Paxton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, who is very much he's a guy who gets stabbed in Terminator. And on the other side of this, then that's it. He's off. Sort of people see him, despite the fact that he's playing probably the whiniest of the Marines. I mean, is he someone you'd want to be in a foxhole with?
I mean, I think he's probably the most entertaining person to be in a foxhole with. Like, he's never boring. And he's the easiest to impersonate if you wanted to make fun of him behind his back.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's funny. He did, I think at Comic-Con like 10 years, maybe it was 9 or 10 years ago, there was an Aliens reunion panel in Hall H, and I got to go to that. And boy, did he loved saying, he knew when he came out and yelled game over, like he knew that was like, I mean, how, that was his, I could have been a contender. That was, that was his trademark line. And it really is like this, I think this, and then this movie, and then because Near Dark was a couple years later, or maybe a year or two later, and I remember seeing Near Dark and be like, oh, this guy is actually like, the fact that he could go from like the whiniest Marine in the galaxy to like this truly intriguing badass nomadic vampire, and then I mean I'm very saddened that he's gone. Weirdly, he was the first famous person I ever met and interviewed. Like 30 years, whenever Simple Plan came out, which I think is honestly for people who love aliens and are wondering like what else did Bill Paxton do, I do think A Simple Plan is like one of the best movies of the last 30-40 years. But also he is so good in that. But he was just such a great he was a great, reliable, egalitarian presence in so many films. But I don't know if he ever got one that was as gleeful in some ways as this one.
I mean, it's funny because I have seen A Simple Plan, I think, but One False Move is the one I think.
Oh
of
my
him.
God, what a great movie! Yeah,
Yeah,
they just
which,
screened that out here recently, and I missed it. I love that film.
I don't think it's not easy to see, but that was one I saw at University Film Society, I think, and again, it's not. It's one of those things. I always admire people who make really difficult things look easy, and and you think, oh well, that's not such a hard character to play. The sort of the local sheriff who's quite keen, but actually, there's so many ways to do that wrong. And
he's a terrible guy, and you actually kind of like him. I mean, you feel for him.
Yeah.
No, One False Move. Actually, I think Criterion finally put that out last year. So for people who haven't seen it, it's now finally kind of like very readily available. And Carl Franklin, who did that, also did Devil in a Blue Dress, which is a great double feature of '90s noirish storytelling. I highly recommend those.
Yeah. So Bill Paxton is the person who comes through from this.
And Michael Biehn, I love the scene. Michael Biehn and Sigourney Weaver in this movie have fantastic chemistry. I mean, their relationship.
It's one tiny scene.
Yeah, but it's a great where he's showing her how to use a gun. And it's like, what a great. I mean, that's the kind of romantic scene that James Cameron can write. Like his characters, they fall in love because they're fighting something together, or they're trying to survive something together, and that's obviously Linda Hamilton and even Titanic has that too. But I do think the scene when some of the looks she's giving him when they're giving each other when he's loading the gun and showing how to do it, it's really romantic. I mean, it's really it's a courtship. It's a high tech courtship as they're preparing to die, basically.
Yeah, well, it's weird because it's never followed up. There's no kiss. There's no, and indeed, Bean is then written out of the next film. So you're absolute. It's a weirdly hot moment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he shoots them in close up, looking at each other. I mean, that's James Cameron is telling you like these are two people who are attracted to each other, and he wants that. He wants you to feel that spark.
Yeah, that's best death. Now I've got Vasquez Gorman, but you want to make the case for Burke.
I mean look the we haven't even talked about the anti-big corporation, like this idea of using a giant corporation to tell a story about how all corporations, the idea of using a big studio movie, a big sequel of a movie that was popular an earlier decade to tell the story of a giant corporation that is strip mining whatever resources it can and exploiting its people.
Yeah.
But I also think, Paul Reiser, for people, my context of him when I saw this movie was he was on a sitcom out here.
Yeah.
And he is such a great scumbag yuppie. I mean, he's the archetypical kind of 80s scumbag yuppie, and he plays it so well. The only comparable role is maybe in Manhunter, the journalist Freddie Lands. Like there is something about these mid 80s like guys with like they spend a lot of time on their hair and their suits, and they smile at you, but they're complete sociopathic sharks. And so when he dies, it's like there's not a lot of scenes in the middle of Aliens where you can cheer because it's mostly really bad things happening. But that is I think people clapped when that happened, and also and also Cameron is just like, I'm going to rob you of the satisfaction of this guy getting his face eaten off. You're just going to you're going to fill in the blanks of what happened to this character you've all come to hate. I mean, he's the worst. He's the movie's villain. The aliens are just doing what they do. They're protecting their brood and surviving. Like Burke is killing all these Marines for a pay bonus,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we can jump to nastiest Nazi if you like. He's absolutely how Carter Burke turns out to be worse than the alien as the villain of this film that's a real achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, my case for Vasquez Gorman is just it's a terrifically sort of heroic death.
Yeah.
And B, it's a character redemption moment for Gorman. And,
I love that. Yeah.
And look, basically he's out of his depth. He is the classic sort of overpromoted lieutenant, but there is a reason why he joined the Marines, and there is a reason why he was made a lieutenant. And just for a moment there, you get a flash of it, I guess.
Yeah,
would be my
yeah.
And Vasquez gets a fantastic line, you know.
Oh yeah.
And it stayed with me. There are themes, you know, there's sort of the two of them gripping the grenade together, and her sort of holding his hand over hers. All of that is yeah.
Especially with that lighting. I mean, it's a great. It's kind of a hot scene in its own way.
Yes. Good luck. The best meme. I mean, the one I use a lot is nuke the site from orbit.
Yeah, I do love that line. I mean, that is. I mean, I do feel like I just feel like I've seen Game Over exist in GIF form. You know, it's like it was on Tumblr a lot in the 2000s. It's you can use it. I think it's the most enduring kind of line image from this movie. I think maybe I can't imagine there's that many hardcore movie fans who haven't seen Aliens, but I feel like if you are at least partly engaged in film culture, you know Game Over and where it comes from. You know, it's like I said, it's like that is his like I could have been a contender. That is like one of the greatest movie lines, and it's so funny, and it's the fact that it's cutting the tension and what a goofball he is. I think that's a very relatable moment.
Stiffest upper lips. I mean, Hicks. Sorry, not Hicks. Hudson definitely does not have a stiff upper lip.
Right. Yeah.
Duncan and I have a theory that America's never really grasped the stiff upper lip, which you're welcome to argue with. There's sort of the classic sort of British sea captain who's been sent out without any bullets in order to go and make a heroic sacrifice to raise the whole tone of the war is a theme that runs through all the British films of the 50s. Whereas in American films, it tends to be about very tough people going places and winning.
And I think in this movie, especially where the Americans are very much like Burke is there to make money. Everyone else is just doing a job. Ripley's got her own, like, I'm dealing with something. I want to like make sure the world is safe. I don't know if there's really even a room in this movie for a kind of a stiff upper lip kind of American character.
Although now I think about Bishop sort of
you're right, yeah.
Bishop being sent. I don't, it's like, I don't want to do this.
Though is he American? I guess too. I mean, that's the other thing too. Is like, what is his what is his cultural background? No, you're right. Actually, I think you're right. Actually, it does make sense. Especially since like that scene of him going through his tunnels is so, for me, I have real claustrophobia. Like those scenes are terrible. Even as an actor, yeah.
So you couldn't pay me.
No, it's one of the scenes in the movie where I really do squirm. That scene really gets me more than any of the alien attacks.
The Dan Buster's Dog Prize. I do have a problematic moment in sort of 21st century light. Have you got any?
I'd love to hear yours first. Maybe I'm always weird with these because I'm very much trying to always look at these movies in the time they were made.
Well,
I think I probably go a little easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, so do we. But so Jeanette Goldstein as Vasquez is.
Yes. Yeah.
You would. She is not. You wouldn't know it, but I didn't know it until I did research. She is not Latino.
No. Yeah.
And had spent quite a lot of time in makeup. And I think if you're remaking Aliens in 2025, you were going to have a Latin character.
Yeah.
You would find a Latin actor.
Yeah, when it comes to casting stuff like that, I always try to
she's great.
She's fantastic in it. I'm only a few minutes away from one of her bra stores here in Burbank.
Right, yes.
She has a bra company now. I did this a couple of years ago on the movies of 1999. I got a lot of questions about Hilary Swank being cast in Boys Don't Cry. And, would that happen now? And of course that wouldn't happen now. I mean, there would be a trans performer would get that role. That said, I do think Hilary Swank in Boys Don't Cry is fantastic and was the right choice for the time. And I think Jeanette Goldstein is fantastic in this movie. And I mean, I don't know how many other actors could do those pull-ups. First of all, she's really built for this kind of role. But I do think she's really good. And again, like all the grunts, if you were to add up the screen time, it's like you're barely with these characters. You're with them when they wake up and then they go to war and they die. So the fact that they can kind of I mean, you'll see people. I've seen people with like Vasquez T-shirts out here. Like that character is still really beloved, and yeah, the optics of maybe how it was cast, or rather, what the reasons for putting her in that role. But she's great in it, and ultimately, like this is the movie we have. So
Yeah.
I'm at peace with it.
Loose lips. The best lines. I love everything that Apone says.
Yeah.
Actually, somehow we haven't talked about Apone, and who is played by Al Matthews, who was a genuine Marine Corps sergeant with 2 Purple Hearts and a number of decorations.
Yeah.
And I find myself quoting Apone the whole time.
I love it. It's so funny because I sometimes will in the morning. I will sometimes say like another glorious day in the Corps.
Exactly.
I love that whole speech. Like every paycheck a fortune. Like yeah, he's fantastic. He's the one character that I do wonder if they made a mistake by killing him off too early in the movie. But I also understand why you need to just have one leader, because otherwise then it becomes a who's in charge of the mission kind of thing. And once it's pretty clear that Ripley is the only one who knows what's going on, but Apone is like it is kind of a loss for him to disappear because it's such a great performance, and every scene of his is so fun to watch. And that cigar rolling around his mouth, like it was just like, yeah, it's a great prop.
Yeah, I mean, it was a laugh of delight when in our house when he comes out of hypersleep and immediately puts a cigar in his mouth.
It's great, yeah,
and,
yeah.
Sort of...
He's like a baby with a pacifier waking up. It's, pops right in, yeah.
When actually the bit where they're going in and he's trying to hear Gorman and you can see a completely professional man trying to sort of, right, I've got to manage these people who are in front of me, and I've got my boss in my ear, and I can't exactly hear what he's saying, and it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do my, and I am a consummate professional trying to do my best and it's just about to go horribly. All of that is really, you've got to believe in him. And actually, I regret his disappearance in the film, but I think if he's alive, what Michael Biehn does really well as Hicks is like, okay.
Yeah.
Technically, I'm in charge.
Yeah.
When Burke says he's just a grunt, it's like, yeah.
Yeah. No, you need him from a narrative sense. You need him gone. It totally makes sense. But just as a viewer and from the performance, you're losing a lot when you lose him. I mean, he's but the last hour does not have a huge amount of humor either. So once he's gone, and the movie starts to get very shit gets real, I guess.
Yeah. They ain't paying us by the hour. I say that. I used to say that quite a lot when I was managing people. I was sort of, Broadsword Radio, completely implausible moments. Now, what have you got?
I mean, this movie feels very lived in and real to me. I've never really, the giant mother alien surviving for that, kind of last third act, like ripping. It's a little bit much, but
no.
I don't bump up against it at all.
Yeah, I mean, Roger Ebert, and indeed, I think my wife asked how the Queen alien knew how to work elevators.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I mean, they've had a lot of time down there. I don't know. Yes. I mean, also elevators aren't that hard. There's usually just 2 buttons, so you hit one, you have a 50-50 chance.
I mean, it's never really clear how it's an interesting question as to the intelligence level of the aliens. It's sort of, we sort of assume they're like ants or wasps or something, but maybe they're smarter. My one is it's a one from a journalist who used to work in finance journalism. Ripley has 57 years of compound interest and back salary and pension. She should be in, she does not need to live in that tiny apartment and work a loader. She should.
No, but do you think that's interesting though? Because I never thought of this, but do you think she actually is doing that because she's out of sorts, or just because she doesn't know what else to do? I mean, that's just what she was before. And that's, having this tiny enclosed space where she has control and trying to get back to work as soon as possible might be what she needs at that point, or thinks she needs,
Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, I just sort of, I just found myself thinking, I tried to work out what 57 years of compound interest, even if she didn't have much saved up, when she went away. There's a fascinating sort of personal finance story behind.
I mean, she's the smartest.
Ripley.
I've known a lot. I've known a lot of people who are very smart about all kinds of things that can't figure out their financial things. So she's the smartest person in all these movies. But compound interest at a certain point, that's harder to learn than a power loader.
There were questions about the airlock in my house as well, but again, I'll allow it. I like it. It's
airlocks never make sense in science fiction or space movies. They would never work that way. I mean, it's just I've never been in one, but they always feel like the screenwriters run out of a thing and there's a button you can push that'll just make all the problems go away. I'm okay with airlocks if they're used sparingly.
Judgment at Nuremberg. I don't think is wiping out a species. I mean, technically they don't in the end nuke the species because it's the species wipes itself out, so that's sort of fine. I mean, and I as Ripley and Hicks say, I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Now, this is normally the moment at which I would ask Duncan whether this is the operation that changed the course of the war against the xenomorphs. But as he's not with us, I'm going to ask you: is this a film that changes movie history in the sense that in 1984, no one wants to make Alien 2, and in sort of 1987, they must clearly be thinking, what will Alien 3 look like?
Right. I mean, I do think that there is something to this movie as an example. I mean, when you read about 80s Hollywood, there is a real, as you mentioned at the top of the show, there is a real sneering industry-wide opinion about sequels. And they are being made, like there's a lot of them being made in the 80s. And it sounds strange to be like there's an anti-sequel movement in the 80s when sequels blew up. But I do think there was a sort of, with the exception of maybe some of the Amblin movies or Raiders of the like Temple of Doom or a couple movies like that, there was sort of a real eye roll, like this is the bottom of the barrel kind of creativity. I do think Aliens in a way was such a good sequel in a way that it both really boosted what studios were willing to like looking at their catalog and be like, can we make an Aliens? And I also think it kind of ruined sequels because it's up there with like Godfather 2 and Empire Strikes Back, where it's like it's inarguably as good and for some people better than the original. It's very it's very distinct. It's a very different filmmaker, very different ideas. And I do think that it probably made some people a little naive about what you can do with a sequel because you keep getting more and more of them in the late 80s and early 90s. But I also think that it just, I worked in a video store in the 90s and there was just so many schlocky Aliens ripoffs where it's just like, and I'm blanking on some of the names because they were so low rent, but they're just like, there's like Deep Space Nine or like Leviathan, just like whether it's like let's do aliens but it's kind of underwater, or and some of the movies were just one alien, but it's certainly Alien and Aliens were still being kind of ripped off and people were still kind of reaching for them throughout the late 80s and even into the early 90s, I think. I mean, and again, I think part of it's like this movie was so good, it wasn't just that it made money, it's like, oh, you really can actually make a good one of these things.
Yeah, I think it is. You're right. There's a very short list of films where you look at the sequel and you say, "Gosh, you know what? That is a good film in its own right." And this is way up there. I mean, it in terms of it becomes this franchise. So the box office for the Alien franchise is now $1.6 billion.
Okay.
Which does not include the Predators, the Alien versus Predator spin-off,
right?
Of which have made $300 million, and somehow, according to Wikipedia, there are only 2 of them. And I feel like there are more than 2 Alien versus Predator films, but apparently there are only 2 of them. But I mean, that's sort of, and now there's Alien Earth, which is come to. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
I'm finally going to start it this weekend. I've been putting it off for a little bit because I wanted time to actually concentrate on. But I'm very excited for it. I mean, I go up and down with this franchise. I do think Alien and Aliens are about as good as the movies got. But like I mentioned, like I revisited those Dark Horse Comics Alien comic books a couple of years ago, and I was like, these are still really good. And I know other people love people play there's different video games and The people who are in the building models have a lot, like they love the alien stuff. So it still feels like a very vibrant franchise. And obviously the one last year did so well and did really well. I think it did really well in China. Like there's a big following for these movies. They still tap into something, even if, even if they don't all fire on all cylinders. And I actually want to revisit Prometheus. I've seen some people, much younger film lovers, talking about that movie online and kind of demanding that it get a second look. And I'm actually would kind of be really interested in revisiting the later Ridley Scott Alien films at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk about the sort of all of the ways these things spun off. I've just remembered in about 1992, before Alien 3 had come out, I went to the Aliens Experience in London, where,
Oh, wow.
they put you into a lift. Someone sort of
Yeah.
in central London space with actors. It's the kind of thing that there's loads of these things now. The bit of it that I remember is we were all in a lift and the lights go out and somebody who was clearly an actor is grabbed by another actor in an alien suit and disappears.
Oh my God, that sounds like a blast.
Well, it was great. It was sort of like...
Why don't they do that now? I don't know why. There was an alien moment. I think on Disney had like the Great Movie Ride, where I think they had like the alien pop down from the ceiling, if I remember correctly. Please don't email me if I'm wrong, Disney people. When you're wrong, we'll not let you forget it. But I do. It does feel like from a weird it's weird to be like, I think they should exploit this property more. Is a very cynical thing to say, but like I do think like I mean, they're doing like a Fast and Furious roller coaster out here. It's coming out in a year or two. I'm like, I'd much rather have like an Aliens one. That'd be much more fun.
Yeah, that's worth dying for.
Sure.
How does this film? No, not so much the roller coaster. How does this film stand up? I mean, we love it.
Yeah, it still works. I mean, like I said, I saw it 2 years ago in the theater. I was still scared and rooting for everyone, despite knowing how it all plays out. And I don't think any of the sequels or any of the ripoffs have ever really. Some of them have interesting ideas in their own way. I don't think the real tension of this movie has been replicated throughout the series. Or, it's also like it's very unique to have a sci-fi horror movie that really feels evenly balanced between both. Like it is scary. There's some stuff in it that's creepy, but the bare bones sci-fi stuff is so entertaining I think that's a hard mix. I think Cameron can do it. I think Verhoeven can do that really well sometimes. I mean, his movies are much more sci-fi than horror, but it's a hard lane to stay. It's hard to kind of stay balanced in that. Even a movie, one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years, which is Attack the Block, has to go a little more on comedy to make that sci-fi horror thing work. So there are a lot of hard elements to pull off well here.
I think what's amazing is the extent to which the special effects still work. I mean,
people in suits and robotic. Yeah, great, looks fantastic.
Yeah. There's the odd moment where you think, oh right, that's clearly just back production, but almost all of it, it looks good and even looks good in a way that stuff released this year doesn't.
Practical stuff shot on film will always look better to me than CGI, but I'm also old at this point, so I've been told.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I think this might be my favorite James Cameron film.
It's 100% mine. Yeah, I love Terminator 2. I have a lot of fondness for Titanic and True Lies. Avatar, I'm not the biggest fan. Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I just didn't have a girlfriend in '97. There was no need.
But this is 100%. This is my favorite movie by him for sure. Yeah.
That's well, and for many of our listeners, Brian Raftery, thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Thank you. This has been great. I appreciate it. I love talking about aliens.
Well, we'll have you back to talk about something else. This has been War Movie Theatre. Thanks everyone for listening, and next week we hope to have retrieved Duncan from whatever hibernation pod he's currently in. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks for listening, everyone. Next week we'll be watching the 1964 Cold War apocalyptic chiller Failsafe. And if you enjoy this podcast, leave a 5-star review and do please tell your friends about it. If you've got suggestions, if you think we're doing the wrong categories or you want different categories or there's a film you'd want us to cover, please do drop us a line at warmovietheatre@gmail.com or get in touch via our Facebook page.